Morning, Matt. So, just as I get back to Winchester, you have disappeared. Where are you now?
I'm in Barcelona. In fact, to be more precise, I'm in Barceloneta, which is the sort of beach resort area. Very fitting for me, obviously, to be on a beach, which is, well, very close to the harbour, actually. Well, I can show you there. That's the beach out there, which is actually just there. It will be the racecourse area for the America's Cup. And it goes up that way, up and down that way, along the beach.
So, as you know, I was in windless Marseille for 2 weeks. So, I'm assuming that all the wind must have been in Barcelona that whole time. How is it? Have we got enough wind to get these AC-75s foiling?
Yeah, we seem to have. So I've been here for 3 or 4 days now, and teams have been out there practicing. I went out on the water a couple of days ago to go and watch the Athena Pathway girls and youngsters, well, and the youth sailing team. It's as you would expect here. It's a sort of sea breezes build in the afternoons, nothing in the morning. Sea breezes build, but it's nice. I mean, they only need, as we know, they only need 6, 7 knots, and they're out there charging around at 30 knots. So, yeah, it's pretty good so far. And it's been yesterday. It was pretty breezy. It was, I say pretty breezy. We're recalibrating what we say really breezy is. It was 12 to 16 knots yesterday, so that was pretty breezy. And there were three of them out yesterday. The Americans, Luna Rossa, and I don't know who the other one was. It was so far away, I couldn't see who it was. But yeah,
Okay.
no, plenty going on.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm not around much because I'm off, or not in Winchester for long, because I'm off to China, to Pingtan, apparently referred to as the Maldives of China. So I can't wait. And that is for a wing foil racing event. Um, and I remember when I did a number of China Cups in a series of years in Shenzhen in the south of China, and uh, it's like the Cows Week or a classic yacht regatta. And one of the strap lines for that regatta was it was 50 times better than the America's Cup because the America's Cup only has two boats and the China Cup had 100. So, and on that basis, the event that I'm going to is 60 times better than the America's Cup because we got 120 wing foilers due to compete in this event. So that world seems to be going up. And as you probably know, all these highly paid America's Cup races, when they're not flying around on their multi-billion-dollar AC-75s, all spend their spare time and their spare money on wing foiling. So it's sort of, a bit circular. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm off to the absolute core of the America's Cup doing what I'm doing.
Go on, you sell it like that. That sounds you, you I mean, it is interesting because there has been quite a lot of chat here in the evenings over a few beers about the games, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a minute. But one of the suggestions among some of the sailors here is, well, surely wing foiling, that's got to be in there as an Olympic game, easy, accessible, and the rest of it, especially when you compare it, the cost of that to the cost of what you were telling me about the other day about the cost of kite foiling, which seems, well, an awful lot more than I expected it to be. I couldn't believe how expensive it is.
Yeah, but the people that were saying wing foiling is the answer to all our problems, have they actually watched any of the last 2 weeks of the Olympics in Marseille? I mean, one of the fundamental problems with pure foilers in whatever form they come is that when they're not foiling, they're not doing anything at all. And that was cruelly exposed in Marseille. Firstly, with the IQ foils, which need 8 or 9 knots of wind to get going, and then even when it was so light that the kite foilers couldn't get going. But the kite foilers still need 4 or 5 knots, and then yes, they'll do in excess of 30 knots. But if there's less than 4 or 5 knots, then they're in the water. Um,
Some might say that's a bit of an advantage, isn't it? At least we know where we stand. We're not bobbing around, sitting in a boat, looking at people trying to sort of flop their way up the beat or something. It's either on or it's off.
Yeah, well, I haven't actually read what he said yet, but I see that Rodney Patterson, the triple Olympic medalist from way back in the 60s and 70s, has weighed in on the how ridiculous he thought that medal race was for the Ilka Sevens, the lasers, which was basically a penalty fest. Um, and yeah, so flopping around in a boat that does still float in 4 or 5 knots is not always a very satisfactory race to watch either. I mean, let's be honest, none of it for most of the time was terribly exciting to watch, and I'm sure that the sport is under some scrutiny because of that, and it's because of the lack of wind more than anything else. And that's the that's the bit that we can't control, other than maybe being really, really
Well,
careful about venue selection.
yeah, and yet uh one of my thoughts on it was, and it's interesting because it was dropped from this game, so supposedly was, just imagine what we might have had as an alternative had offshore sailing been part of the games. Because if that project had been executed in the way that they said it was going to be, i.e., it was going to be a big brother exercise with cameras that could be switched on at any time on any of the boats, that would have provided a superb backdrop, I think, a fascinating insight that you could use as sort of background stuff when there were delays. You could go out to the you go out to the offshore sailing, and if they're flopping around in no breeze, it doesn't matter. You're still, looking in on what's going on and whether they're frustrated, and you could have had all kinds of commentary built around that. I think it would have lent itself really well to sort of covering the gaps in between, the gaps that were really very, very frustrating, not just for spectators and viewers, but for the broadcasters.
Totally agree. That was such a big miss, and it's such a pity that that got knocked back, and it was done for political reasons at IOC level. And that doesn't happen very often. But it was an individual playing personal politics with somebody else that was what led to that being scuppered. And I totally agree with you. I think that would have brought another dimension to the sailing, and what better place to have done that than in France, the absolute home of
Yeah.
offshore racing as well. So yeah, big miss,
Any
and
chance we'll come back?
yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, it of course is only going to be a sport that I say this only accessible to the richer sailing nations. Actually, as I say that, probably not true, but probably the medals are only going to be won by the bigger sailing nations. But you can still have people, sailors from some of the smaller nations competing. I just don't know if they'd ever actually be competitive.
Mm.
And that was one of the great outcomes of the Ilka Seven, which I think is pretty awful to watch. It's not very exciting to watch, but the outcome of the medals with Australia taking gold, yeah, that's fine. That's business as usual. But Pavlos Contides getting the second ever Olympic medal for Cyprus, and he got the other one, the first ever in London 2012. So those two silvers are really special to Cyprus, and then Stefano Peschiera from Peru, getting the bronze medal there. Fantastic for a nation that's only won 6 Olympic medals in the whole history of the modern Olympics. So that was a really big deal for him in Peru, and so that's good to see. And when I was asked to do some on the water commentary on a VIP boat with the IOC President Thomas Bach, that was one of the observations that he was making, and he was making this point quite strongly, that it's all looking a bit European, isn't it? Was his comment. So that's clearly sort of his criticism of the sport, and we've got to try and broaden out the appeal of the sport, as we've been trying, as World Sailing and others have been trying. It's got to go further into Asia, further into Africa, and South America, and it's got to break beyond its European and sort of North American bounds, really.
It's hard though, isn't it? I mean, it's hard. I mean, it was a few years ago now, but there was an Indian 49er team, wasn't there, for a while? Sure.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I think there was one in Tokyo, and there were some FX teams running up until a couple of years ago, and then the crew, uh, Shveta, was struggling to find somebody else to do a full-on FX campaign with her, so she's gone off to the States to be a pro sailor over there. But yeah, it's amazing that in a country of 1 billion people, that a keen sailor can't find another keen sailor to go and do an
Yeah.
Olympic campaign. So no, these are difficult problems.
Now, you mentioned Thomas back there. You were teasing, well, you were suggesting that there was a story to be told last time we spoke. Come on,
Yeah.
reveal.
Well, David Graham, the CEO of World Sailing, said, "Oh, I need you to get on the boat with Thomas Bach, and he doesn't know much about sailing, so I just want you to help sort of talk through what he's watching, and and just explain anything that he wants explaining." So anyway, I get on the boat. There's about 10 of us on the boat, and another one of them is Santiago Langer, the three-time Olympic medalist. Maybe it's even four, I can't remember, but that amazing gold medal that he won age 54 in Rio in the NACRA 17. So I said to Santi, I'm down to do some commentary here for Thomas Bach, and he knows and I know that we've only got 2 hours of his time and his attention before he buzzes back up to Paris, and we've got to put our best foot forward as a sport. So I said, can you tag team with me as a, sort of doing this commentary with me? He said, yeah, fine, whatever helps. Anyway, we both sit down opposite Thomas Bach, and he has a bit of a chat with Santi, and then I introduce myself and say, I am Andy Rice, sailing journalist. I'm here to help explain anything you want explaining. He said to me, Thomas Bach said to me, why would I want to hear anything that you've got to say when I've got this man here? And there was hush, there was deadly hush in the boat, like, oh my God. And I said to Thomas, I said, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that no one knows more about this sport than me, than Santi. So I'm wearing a life jacket. If you want to push me overboard now, feel free. And I mean, a German lawyer, a British journalist, different senses of humor. It was hard to tell whether he was actually saying it the way that he was saying it. But anyway, Santi was that hush of deadly silence. Santi said, "No, no, no. Andy really does know what he's talking about." But as far as Thomas was concerned, he had mentally pushed me overboard, and I decided that I wasn't going to add anything to help sailing stay in the Olympics. I was going to leave it to Santi after that.
Well, at least we can blame him. Oh my God. Oh
Yeah,
dear.
yeah. So I was firmly put in my place.
I
Yeah.
mean, so having had a week to sort of decompress and get yourself out there, and bearing in mind, I'm sure it's a conversation that could go on all day, knowing what we're like. But what are your sort of headline thoughts as to when you look back at the games? What do you think the key points that should be taken forward will be from this? Because there's clearly a lot of chatter about this and that from the games. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the big one is the lack of wind, and there's no point in post-morteming whether Marseille was the right choice or not, other than I think it probably was made for political reasons, to throw the south of France a bone, because most of the actions up north in Paris. I don't know what all the factors were that went into deciding Marseille, but we've just got to be really careful that venues are chosen in the future that don't compromise the sport for political reasons. So in the near future for Long Beach, which is just outside of LA, for 2028, that should be okay. It's a fairly well established place where people like to go sailing at that time of year, July or August, whenever it is, should be fine. And then Brisbane, we don't yet know where the venue for Brisbane 2032 is going to be. But that's the biggest overall point, because that's the bit we really can't control. Everything else we can control. I could go on and on about formats. I'm really pleased that people are up in arms about formats after what happened to Emma Wilson, the British IQ foil sailor, who absolutely dominated in the opening series and had a 30-point advantage going into the final three-way race. But there is no, everything gets scrubbed to zero. She started in the yellow bib position, had a great start, made a bad ley line call that basically reversed the fleet, and Italy's Marta Maggetti ended up winning that winner takes all race. And there was a feeling that Emma Wilson was the deserving winner of that gold, but didn't get it because of a format that's gone too far in a certain direction. And people say, what other sport would decide their medals that way? Well, I read that on social media the other day. I was thinking, have you seen anything of the modern Olympics lately?
I was going to say the modern track, any of the track and field.
or any of these new things that have come in, like 8 BMX bikes, uh, side by side, come out of a gate. 35 seconds later, we've got a gold medal winner, and two people have crashed into the side of the wall in 35 seconds. I mean, there's so many examples. So we're obviously coming from a very conservative scoring system, and I've been a long critic. I've been criticizing the medal race for the last 10 years or more, and then I had to eat my words in the first week with those skiff races where we had 7 out of 10 of the men's 49ers in with a shout of gold, and then 5 out of the 10 women's 49er FX with a shout of gold. If it was like that every time, I'd say fine, this is absolutely fine. But the reason why that happened was because the conditions were so funky, so fluky. It still had taken all regatta to still not find a clear leader. Whereas the following week, my criticisms and views of the medal race were fully vindicated when we had Marit Bouwmeester win the Ilka Sixes with a race to spare, and pretty much Matt Wern winning with a race to spare, but only Pavlos Contides could challenge him. So potentially Pavlos was going to get sailed all the way out of the medals for being the one guy that had sailed well enough to challenge Matt Wern, which to me is as gross an injustice for different reasons. If it had happened, it didn't happen. So none of these things ever get talked about unless someone does actually suffer, like the way Emma Wilson did. But there's a miscarriage of justice when the medal race goes that way as well. So there are problems, and with those two formats, and I don't think anyone's got the right answer on formats, but I do think that the kites have got the closest to the right format, where there is final day jeopardy, there is a potential for an upset, but I've never seen anyone, and I've reported at probably 10 or 15 of these kite events in the last 2 or 3 years, probably more than that. I've seen upsets, but on the last day I've seen positions change, but I've never seen anyone complain that the medals went in the wrong direction. I think everyone accepts that there is the right amount of jeopardy without actually jeopardizing the justice of the best athlete winning the best medal.
Mm.
But I just hope that we use the next 4 years to try other formats.
Interestingly, I suspect formats are probably going to be something that's talked about quite a lot down here as well with the Cup, because we're just about to start this preliminary regatta down here, which starts on Thursday. There's 2 practice races. I think it's Monday and Tuesday, and then the first preliminary regatta event starts on Thursday, and they don't actually count for any points as far as the selection series is concerned. But I was around with the Brits the other day, and was talking to Ben and some of the others, and I was saying to Ben, how do you feel about the preliminary event? And he said, well, on the face of it, sure, it's not worth any, doesn't count for anything when it comes to Challenger selection series. But he said the bottom line is that by the 8th of September, so basically by the end of the round robins, someone's going home. And he said that's not very far away, and anybody who's trying to make any changes is running out of time really quickly. You don't have time to do it. And he reminded me about their situation back in the last Cup, in what was called the Christmas Cup, but it was basically the same thing down in Auckland, where their boat was just awful, but they had almost a month to reconfigure their boat in between and try and make it a bit better, which they did. Not better enough, but they made it a lot better in that time. If you've got a dog this time around, you're out. You're going home, and I wonder what will be said about that, because I know, having, like, you've been involved in lots of cups as well, and one of the things that happens with cup sort of formats is that because it takes so long and so much money to actually even get to this point, then as part of the organization tries to keep teams in for as long as they can to at least get some benefit from all that money they've spent. But this time around, it's going to be very short-lived. Could be over in a couple of weeks. Well, it is going to be over for someone in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's crazy to think that, isn't it?
Mm.
And I mean, we're at this most fascinating part of the Cup where everyone still has some sense that, maybe we could win this. The harsh reality is about to kick in for some. and then others are going to be pleasantly reassured that what they thought was a good package is a good package. But I'm not going to ask you who you think is looking fastest. Where's the highest amount of confidence coming from? Who's giving us off the best vibes?
That's a very good question, because they're all, as far as I can see, doing their absolute utmost to not give off any vibes like that. They're all playing it really cool, really well. They're very shy, basically. They don't really want to say anything at all. And funny enough, we were talking about this the other night, and I was sort of harking back to the 32nd America's Cup, the one that was in Valencia. And it was the year before, I think it was 2006, and Oracle Racing it was in the monohulls, and Oracle Racing had been working very hard on their two boats, because you could build two boats back then. And they put out an invitation to the press and a press release that basically said, we have, and this is a year ahead of the Cup, we're just launching our second boat, blah, blah, blah. And our two boats this boat is the most advanced America's Cup boat that the America's Cup world has ever seen. It is unbelievable. And they flew us all down there, and we went in for a presentation in their great big cinema and their massive, great big base, and blah, blah, blah. And the boat was a dog. And it was just like, oh my God. But we didn't know that at the time. But there was a lot of sort of yee-haw going on. And it wasn't just them. Other teams were doing it as well back then. Now, no one's doing that here. No one at all. No one wants to be the favourite. But I think it's difficult to say that there is a consensus, because there isn't. There's just not enough people to form a consensus down here at the moment. And I don't believe there's enough evidence out on the water either. Because you never quite know what people are doing. There's practice racing going on, and it's interesting that there are some views that are coming back off the water, and you hear all kinds of chitter chatter saying such and such a team, bloody hell, they were awful. They couldn't go upwind. They were sailing really low. They couldn't sail deep downwind either. And then you go and sort of hear from another team or that team, you get talking to them, it's like, no, we weren't looking at doing that at the time. We were actually doing something else. Because in the practice racing, they're not obliged to do anything. They're not obliged to even turn up, as far as I'm aware. So they could be sandbagging. Doubt it. They're far more likely to be testing something else when they're lining up. So it's very risky to draw too many conclusions from what's going on. However, having said that, if there is one thing that comes across strongly, and that is that the Kiwis are amazingly quick right now, and that they're saying, yeah, well, they're going to be really, really tough. Now, I don't know whether they're doing that because there's a lot of mind games going on down here as well, and the Kiwis hate being the favourites. They hate it, as you know, and not just in sailing. That's just how they are with their sports. So I wouldn't mind betting that part of it is actually the challengers sort of deflecting attention to them, saying, yeah, they're really, really quick. God knows how we're going to beat them, kind of thing.
Right.
But then the other, as far as the other teams are concerned, the three teams that people seem to be talking about as being pretty quick and up there and pretty sorted is Luna Rossa, American Magic, and the Brits. So those three teams are sort of up there, and then the two that are sort of hesitate to use the word weaker, but maybe not quite as sorted, will be Alinghi and the French. And I guess it's not difficult to see why that people might have drawn that conclusion. The French, lowest hours of anybody, but they've got an identical boat to the Kiwis. And then Alinghi, lowish on experience, and then they haven't, they caused themselves quite a few problems by losing the rig over the side, so that didn't help. We don't really know what happened there, but someone put it to me the other day that if it had been a technical fault with a rigging component or something like that, given that the rigging is one design and the masts are not quite one design but pretty close, if it was a technical fault, then the other teams would have heard something about it by now. And from what I'm hearing, the teams haven't had any memo come across their inbox at all. So sort of suggested it was something within the team that might have caused a problem. Don't know, all speculation. But so, that's sort of the lie of the land at the moment with the teams and where they are. And I guess, the thing that makes it exciting is that on Thursday next week, for the first preliminary event, which is a series of match races, we'll have the first indication as to whether some of that is true. And I certainly don't I've seen quite a lot of chatter on social media and the rest of it. People saying, "Oh, they're just sandbagging. No one's going to show their cards." That's just not. I just don't believe that's the case. And you talk to teams, and they say, "You're kidding. We have so few opportunities to put our boat under pressure and to really race for real. You can't afford to be playing silly games like that. You need to be prepared." I mean, what might happen and what we have seen before is that they'll go out and they'll race. And then we did see this. Anyway, we've seen it before where a team is a lot quicker and they go blasting off. And the Kiwis were good at this, blasting off. And they've clearly got speed to burn. And then they seem to slow down or they put in an odd tack or it's like, what happened there? And yeah, they just diffuse it. They just backpedal a bit. And yes, they sandbag at that point. But people aren't going out there to deliberately sandbag and hold it all back for later. I just don't believe that.
No, I mean every minute that you're sailing these boats is precious anyway, and you can't afford to be wasting minutes on trying to bluff with everybody else. So I think your analysis is completely correct, and what you said about the Kiwis holding back if whenever they found they had a bit of speed to burn, I think that pretty much is the rule of practice racing. You go as fast as you can until you're leading, and then maybe then only then you take your foot off the gas.
I think the other thing that's caused a few raised eyebrows, and I have to admit with mine as well, was that a lot of people haven't realised, and I will put my hand up and say I hadn't either, to be honest, until a couple of months ago, that actually the Kiwis get to sail in the round robins. The Kiwis get to sail in the Challenger Selection Series. I thought it was just the preliminary regatta, which is okay, but they get to race in the first stages of the Challenger Series, Selection Series, which has made some people say, "What? I mean, how can you have that? That doesn't seem right." Well, the answer to that is that actually they only sail in the round robin stage. Once you get to the knockout stages, then they play no further part in it. So it's going to be interesting because we're going to see them. They obviously want to see what the other challengers are like. And actually, in many ways, Ben was saying this the other day, asked him about it. And he was saying, yeah, some people don't really like it. But he said the fact of the matter is that, if we think everybody here is here to try and get to the cup, to try and win it, no one's here just to turn up for it. And you might as well know what you're up against now. So you've got some time to, get a feel for them as well. So it cuts both ways. But of course, the other thing
I don't really buy that, but anyway, no, I mean, I think that's a convenient argument made by the challenger of record, who would have had to have agreed to what I think is a sort of a bit of a dilution of a pure America's Cup, where the challengers come along, they are there to throw everything they've got at the walls of the castle. But the idea that the king of the castle comes out to play with them beforehand, no, I don't go with that at all. I think that if you're serious about trying to topple the defender at all costs, then you wouldn't allow the defender to get involved in any stage of the process early on.
I don't think that always works. So I'd take issue with two things there. One is the notion of the pure America's Cup as it happens. I've just been doing a whole load of stuff on some of the really early ones. And of course, I'm saying this tongue in cheek because I know what you mean. But the idea that the challengers never lined up against the defender until the match has only been around for a few decades. It hasn't been for the majority of the 170 years. That's the first point. So these things are very fluid and they just change to match the environment that you're in at the moment. The other thing I'd say is that in those occasions where they haven't met up, in most, if not all of those occasions, the cup itself has ended up being a whitewash. It's never been a close match. And it's only since we've had a closer collaboration, well, not even collaboration, but a closer, when you have had the challenger and defender meet up beforehand, the racing has actually ended up a little bit closer in the cup. But most of the time, it's just been a one-sided affair.
No, that's
I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I'm
no,
not
no.
sure.
I think I go with all of that, and I think the most important thing for the America's Cup is for it to be close competition. in terms of its commercial appeal and is it going to be interesting? Because we do have this rose-tinted view that America's Cup was better in the old days, but actually most America's Cups have been really boring one-sided whitewashes. But I still hold to the view that you're just playing into the hands of, well, you're giving a bit of ammunition to the enemy by allowing the defender to take part in your fun and games.
Well, the other thing you do allow the potential for, and I suspect they would disagree with this themselves, but potentially the other thing you allow is you allow the defender to actually put pressure on and try and, is influence the right word? Yeah, I guess influence is the right word, to try and influence the outcome of, I mean, it's probably a bit of a long shot, but you could, I guess, have put pressure on certain challengers to reveal more than they wanted to reveal, because it's not about beating. Sorry, I just got a sweeper truck coming past. It's not about beating whether they beat the defender or not at that point. It's whether you put them under pressure to get them to reveal something that they wanted to keep to themselves, or that they lose out to one of their challengers and somehow don't make it through to the next stage, or whatever. I mean, it is a long shot, but it's potentially something you could influence, but maybe not in the round robin stage. If it went on longer, you possibly could, but it's an
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal either way, but well, not unless there is a collision between the defender and one of the challengers during
Well,
the round robin. I mean, that will open a can of worms.
mm, yeah, yeah, could do. Well, let's hope we don't get that, because that will be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah,
Yeah, add something like that. But talking of which, actually, or not so much collisions, but talking of the spectacle, yeah, another thing that's come out is chatting to people. I've been saying, oh, well, I've sort of, I guess I was sort of saying, I'm most interested to see what's going to happen in the low wind ranges, because what we're hearing from Ben said it, Terry said it, various other people of Terry Hutchison, that is, and Paul, no, sorry, it wasn't Terry, it was Paul Goodison, and Tom Slingsby of American Magic, and I've heard some other people say it as well. It's one of the things that really stands out in these new boats is the smooth and almost, well, not effortless, far from it, but the smooth transition from displacement to full foiling in these boats. They say it is incredible how they, in the older boats, they had to really sort of work them up stage by stage, a bit like pumping the thing up onto the plane, and then you get it onto the foils and away we go. Now it's just straight the way through. It's a 6 or 7 knots true wind speed. They're off. And
that's amazing.
yeah, Freddie Carr was telling me about it as well, and he was saying it's just, because I said, how much can you really feel a difference? Because you're sort of head down, arse up on your bicycle in your sweat box of a bike. You're not allowed to look out. You can't stick your head up or anything like that. They literally these guys, the cyclists, they can't see anything. How they don't throw up in those sweat boxes being thrown around, I do not know. But anyway, he was saying you definitely can feel it. He said the boat feels totally different to the previous boat. He said and he's not alone. I've heard this from other people as well. But so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I sort of discounted, in a way, I thought, yeah, well, we're not really going to see much at the top end, because no one's really concentrating on the top end that much. Where you're going to lose out most is not being able to get on foils at the bottom end. And then Ben put me straight on that, and he was saying, well, you wait till you see it. If we get high teens, low 20s, you'll be blown away as to what these boats can do. And even he said, it was an interview I put up the other day, he said, even I can't, worst effective, even I can't get my head around how it's even possible that a boat can go this fast. There's a man that's just invested just an awful lot of time in making sure it can, and even he can't get his head around it.
Yeah, no, they are still. It's a fantastic concept, isn't it? That most of us, and I'm pleased to hear that Ben Ainsley's one of them. Most of us still don't understand the
Yeah,
physics of how it works.
yeah. I tell you the other thing, just one quick thing, was that I did get to see, and this was a rare opportunity. I have been in there several times before, but the Brits gave me a tour of their base the other day when I got here, and the big boat was in there being pulled apart, and it sort of looked like a model kit with all the bits laid out, ready to go back together. But the foil arms were off, the wings were off the bottom. But the fascinating thing was, for a geek like me, it was I could walk all the way around it and look at the components and actually see how they go together. And one of the things, well, a couple of things struck me actually. One is that when you see that British boat in the flesh, when you look at it from above the deck, looking down, it looks pretty sleek, and you go, "Ooh, that's a lot sexier and slipperier than I imagined it to be from the pictures I'd seen, the stills I'd seen, or the video I'd seen." So it looks pretty sleek. And you think, oh, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe it's not as extreme. And then you walk down the stairs and stand up underneath it, and you look up from around where the foil arms are at the hull. It's, oh my God. I mean, it is so extreme under the water. That was really surprising. But the other thing was that when you look at the foil arms and the componentry and the foils themselves, my God, are they complex? I mean, the connections and the sophistication inside those foiling arms, just the arms themselves, is unbelievable. I mean, no wonder they cost what they do and take best part 6 months to build each, or whatever it is, but incredible. And the other thing is how slender the foils themselves are. They're very skinny, compared to last time, very skinny, high aspect ratio, thin foils. And yeah, super fun. And you look at them, you think, what? Supporter, what do they weigh? 6 tons, those boats. Supporter 6 tons on that. You must be joking. But they do. But when you see it up close, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Funny enough, they wouldn't let me take any pictures to show you.
You're making the whole thing up, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. I can say what I like.
Right, the road sweeper's coming. That road sweeper's been hanging around. I think it's.
I think he thinks I'm making the mess, actually. He's been going around me all morning, but there we go.
Right, Matt, have a lovely week in Barcelona. We'll catch up in a few days' time. Not long to go till racing.
No, not long at all. No, as I say, practice racing starts on Monday, Tuesday, real racing on Thursday, and you'll be down in China. I hope you've got enough blank pages in your passport. It must look like a telephone directory, your passport.
You got me worried now. Yeah,
I'm sent home because you got no space.
Yes, it is a bit like that. Right, I'm off to check that.
Good. Okay, well, safe travels, and yeah, look forward to hearing from China.
All right. Cheers, Matt. Enjoy Barcelona.
Cheers.